Hey folks, it's me, Funk McLovin, with the Rewriting Homestuck. This is episode 5. This episode is a continuation of the previous episode, but you don't need to have seen the last one to understand this one. We'll be discussing Act 5-1 of Homestuck, otherwise known as Hivebent. I'll spare you the recap since we went over things last time, but I do want to clarify some things. For some context, here are some words that we use to mean certain things that might not be totally standardized across the fandom. 1, we say ascension to mean when trolls become adults and go off-world on Alternia, which in our rewrite, the trolls are on the cusp of. Historically, the fandom has called this different things, but we say ascension in this episode. 2, if we ever make reference to death, this is not real-world death. This is Homestuck death, where the characters get to go to the Dream Bubble afterlife, so don't worry. If we say a character should die or something along those lines, we're just saying that. Also, we do have discussions in this episode about fascism and make reference to the Holocaust. They are not graphic references, but be warned for those who might be sensitive to this. We also make reference to real-world sexual abuse as it pertains to Equius. Again, nothing graphic. Alternia is a grim place, so that should go without saying, but there it is. Furthermore, we have some minor spoilers for Full Metal Alchemist and Animal Farm, of all things, so minor spoilers for those things. Finally, to clarify two things, since some commenters brought it up, when discussing June, sometimes the word John is said, particularly by myself. This is because the character is named John in the original work and part of the rewrite. Also, a few people in the comments mentioned Andrew Hussey is going by they now. However, at time of recording, Andrew Hussey mentioned not preferring any pronouns, so we just call him whatever, because that's what he wants. So, without further ado, here are the 5 hosts. For those of you just joining us, this is Rewriting Homestuck, a podcast about rewriting Homestuck. My name is JoJo. I have some friends here with me, some assorted, grab bag of pals. And last time we talked about Hivebent, which is obviously, I didn't realize this for a long time, but it's actually a pun of Homestuck, because bent in some sort of English dialect is synonymous with
all the
obsessed.
MS Paint adventures have sort of followed that naming convention, like Bard Quest, Problem Sleuth, something. Two things.
But yeah, like a new compound word. Jailbreak. Well, that's not a new compound.
No. Andrew invented it. Andrew invented the word. Thank you, Andrew.
We've talked about
we have
somebody called
VRISKA. We've talked about 7/12ths, which is that's the simplest form of the fraction. I'm sorry, all the math people out there, but we've talked about 7/12ths of the trolls, and we left off last week on VRISKA. Now, I don't really have much to say about VRISKA.
I don't believe that.
Sort of an inconsequential
liar.
character.
VRISKumentary.
Pushes the VRISKumentary.
What hasn't been said about VRISKA?
I think the hardest thing here is going to be restricting it to what is actually relevant to rewriting this specific part of the comic.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, starting out, that's a good way to start, actually, is in terms of Hivebent itself, before a lot of because most of actually VRISKA's development goes on in 5.2, which we're not in yet. So we can save some of those things for later, like when she talks to John and kills Tavros and is involved in Murderstuck, etc. But for right now, she really is in this part. I was struck with how much she is kind of pushed to the side almost. It's very clear that Hussey, I think, started out writing her just as kind of a jerk. The type of smug internet person. And something I noticed in my rereading of VRISKA's stuff was she's often thought of as kind of a punk, which I think is the totally wrong interpretation. But she doesn't use contractions. She speaks in a very precise sort of dialect. It's almost Rose-like in how she speaks. But a lot of people forget that. So I wanted to talk about specifically sort of how she's established as like a class figure in this part. We'll just start off arbitrarily. Janaya, you can start with something. I think you had something to say.
I made the comment last time that, I've got lots to say about VRISKA, and that's kind of like true in a very general sense of the word, but honestly, like, again, it's to keep things in the context of like what we're doing specifically and the part of the comic we're working on. Like, my issues with VRISKA as she is presented in the comic aren't really about how she's introduced, but they're about how her actions are then contextualized later on. So, like, I think your point about her being, like, as a class figure, like, she is a member of the aristocracy. She is a person in a position of relative power, although not at the top. And, like, I think establishing that is interesting, and I think, like, the comic as is sort of establishes that. I mean, you could probably be a little more intentional and specific about it, but like most of the issues I have are how her actions are then reflected in the rest of the work. So it's like the changes I would recommend are gonna come up later when we start talking about like how she justifies her actions, or how the text justifies her actions or excuses them, or whatever, and whatever development she has or doesn't have. And like, honestly, in Hivebent, like, I'm pretty okay with her being kind of like a jackass, mid-level aristocrat who represents this kind of like very specific portion of Alternian power and like a very specific view of the system. Because like, I think that class of people is very critical in terms of like maintaining an imperialist power structure. Like, you need the people that are mostly on the top but not on the very top, that want to push everyone else down because they don't want to be lower in the class system. And like, VRISKA is very much that kind of person. Like, she's very like abusive to other people. She does a lot of like maintaining and consolidating her own class position. And like, I think if we're going to be a little more intentional about how we're commenting on, class systems, that VRISKA fills a pretty important role. Just like, I don't like that the rest of the text is like, don't worry, VRISKA's the best, and she's fine, and just is great all the time. Because
VRISKA didn't have problems, that's why she's having like such a good time all the time.
She's having the best time of everyone because she's the best character who's perfect. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that particular like direction that the text goes, but like the establishment in Hivebent, I think actually kind of works. It's what you do with it that matters.
Yeah. To back up the class stuff, she has a couple, and I don't like her as a just strict class commentary. I think there are other trolls who do that better, like Aridin and Equius in particular. But I think she is established in this one as like sort of the PMC, or the professional managerial class as it exists in the real world. And VRISKA does this to great effect, I think, in Flarp, where the people who she is working with are Terezi, who is another person who is not high but not low on the social spectrum, and the people who she is attacking and exploiting are explicitly lower class. Whether this be Tavros and Aradia, or whether it be the people she feeds to her spider mom. And I like this as an allegory of real-world socioeconomic stuff, because her mother represents, I think, how people in those positions of, PMC stuff, people who make like a couple $100,000 a year, maybe they have stock options, stuff like that, they're still exploited by someone higher up than them, and that is exemplified in Spider-Mom. Does anyone else have anything to say about sort of VRISKA and class, or anything in general?
Some thoughts on Tavros, but that's gonna like come after remove from my bed.
Yeah, go on. Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. So
go for it.
I can go. I have my notes. I'll do my 3 paragraphs. They're short. So I haven't had a lot of changes to make. I've mostly just kind of pre-gamed holistic conversation of the Homestuck characters, and that's not just because I'm bad at podcasting. Like we've said, a lot of Hivebent is really solid. Like, a lot of VRISKA's introduction is really cool. It touches along a lot of really relevant themes, but with VRISKA, with our dear beloved Vriska, there's some things I think do need to change for the sake of, like, narrative integrity, characterization, basic human decency. And it's that scene with, like, the stairs, and Tavros in the stairs, and she's just, like, asking him to and, like, the words she uses and everything. We should just get rid of that. That's too much. We've already established that how, Vriska is, how she can be cruel to people. That at this point, the scene is just disruptive. You can tell people who like Vriska never want to discuss this scene. It's because it's not relevant.
Oh, God,
to, like, it's not... It's
not forgivable.
It's just not relevant to what they wanted the character to become later on. It doesn't help. It's really seriously uncomfortable because, like, the story isn't about it going forward. It's just disruptive.
Yeah, same here.
I actually want to build on that in one way. There's a question that I wrote down for myself, which I wanted to address, and that's I don't have an answer for this, but are we gonna? I think the central question of Vriska is, in the rewrite, is she going to be a villain or is she going to be sort of an anti-hero? Because I think that question informs a lot of the specific things she does.
I don't think that Vriska works at her best as just a straight up villain. I think in part because we have Arania that kind of represents a contrast of, like, a different potential path that kind of character can take. And, like, although I do think that Vriska needs to be sort of, like, narratively held more accountable for her actions, and, like, she does a lot of bad things, but I think, like, ultimately she wants to do the right thing in the worst possible way, but not in the way that Arania wants to do the right thing in the worst possible way. Like, Vriska wants to be the heroine that jumps in and is the most important and saves everyone. Arania thinks that she knows best and needs to directly control everyone to make the right thing happen.
Okay,
yeah,
I get
so,
what you're saying. So you're to simplify, you're saying Vriska does she wants to be a hero, but her motivation for being a hero is not entirely selfish. Like, she does definitely want the accolades of being a hero, but at least in the rewrite, it is not entirely selfish. Whereas Arania might want a more, like, selfish
that's
heroism.
Where I go with it.
Like, she thinks she's the only person.
Yeah, the reason that you remove that scene is because the question you asked is the question about Vriska for the first while after she's introduced. Is she a villain or is she an anti-hero? And if she does, like, and Homestuck is it's very cavalier about death. Like, death does mean something, but, like, it kind of primes you to forgive people who do murders a little bit. But, like, being cruel to somebody on the level that she was in that scene is truly unforgivable. Because it's genuinely what other villains in Homestuck do to people. So it puts her on par with a villain, and it's very difficult to come down from doing something that bad. So that we want the answer to that question to be more ambiguous until later.
I agree.
You don't want to tip your hand either way this early. Also, it's just mean and unnecessary.
Yeah, I think that, if you want to have a character who does say horrible things to someone, I don't think that's off the table. I want to be specific about that, but I do think it's off the table for someone who you want to sympathize with later.
Yes.
Especially in what is ostensibly a children's story of Homestuck.
Yeah, some things about, like, anti-hero or villain for VRISKA. That's sort of what Homestuck is about. Because those things are both narrative contrivances, essentially. Like, they're the different sides of that God tier clock, and the God tier clock is what, like, it's a judgment that narrative imposes onto you, as a narrative subjugation onto a character after death, and that's something every character is struggling with and trying to make sense of, as sort of a metaphor for...
Even the ones who don't
exactly,
go to.
yeah.
for making sense of like growing up in these absurd systems. So I think it'd be better for her to find a way to reject that and just be like a better person for herself and for the people she cares about.
I really like that idea. Like I I like VRISKA a lot as a character, and just like in general. Like I just think that she's got a lot of potential to be very interesting as a character who does ultimately like who starts in a position of being kind of a shitty person, and then like ultimately is able to find some sort of like peace with all of that. But like I completely agree that like one, she can't be like irredeemably shitty. Like some of the scenes from this do need to just be left on the cutting room floor. And like I don't know, what's the opposite of gilding the lily? Because it feels like that. Dipping it in shit
Shitting on the
repeatedly.
lily.
Shitting the lily.
Shitting the lily, yeah. Like it's
Yeah.
so
That's a free one.
It's like, it's okay, we get it. She's bad. She does bad things, but like you want her to be able to come back from that. And like I agree with Momo, like reject that narrative fate and find some like peace within that, because like I feel like that there are elements of that in her characterization as it is in the canon work, but like it never gets resolved, and it just kind of leaves everything hanging in a way that feels just weird. It's like I want to see VRISKA get better.
I take out the scene because the Hivebent has already done enough to tell us, what VRISKA's motivations are, specifically towards Tavros. VRISKA is looking for legitimacy inside an absurd system that she hates. She does follow the rules, but she's not happy there.
Yeah.
And her
That's
only
huge.
guidebook through all of this is Mindfang's journal. And
That's a
Mindfang
huge
tried
part
to
of
gain
it.
legitimacy. Yeah. But wanted to co-opt, like, revolutionary movements of lowbloods. So, like, but the problem is Tavros isn't Rufio.
Right.
And he's not, in VRISKA's evaluation, a revolutionary enough person. That's why this thing with the cliff happens. She thought he would spread wings and fly. She wants Tavros to absolve her of the circumstances that she doesn't want to be in, but she has such a revulsion to the idea of weakness, like to her own weakness, to the weakness of others, that she can't really afford to take on a revolutionary ideology in a meaningful way. Like, it asks
I
too
agree.
much of her.
Something, this is a little bit in the next act, but I think it's important to this act and how we set up VRISKA. I think that Homestuck has a problem of telling us what VRISKA wants through her reactions to things, because it's clear that Hussey wants her to be a sympathetic figure through how she talks to John about, my society says this about good and evil, but I disagree, and yet I still am forced to go through with something I don't believe in. And that's very powerful, but she's never shown to actually believe that. For instance, when she, forces Tavros into jumping off a cliff, she's never sorry until she drops her guard around John. Or, fixing Aradia, giving her a body. She is never portrayed to do it because she feels horrible or sorry about it. And so I think original Homestuck has this, what they want to do something with VRISKA that's not real, that never gets realized in the comic itself, and that's very easy to fix. You can just have her be sorry outside of when she's talking to others, or show how tortured she is over this stuff, or like, I don't really believe in base Homestuck that she wanted to make Tavros stronger. I think she was just making fun of someone.
Yeah.
And so giving her a more like, you need to get stronger or you will die. Like that's what original Homestuck wants us to believe about VRISKA, but it doesn't come through. I think you could easily make that happen in regular Homestuck. VRISKA telling Tavros like, you're going to die if you don't wise up, and I'm the only way you're going to be able to wise up. And like hurting him over that and her being very sorry about that, I think would fix a lot of that.
I was going to say that I feel like that the dynamic between VRISKA and Tavros, I feel like it's in canon Homestuck, it gets very bogged down in like just this kind of like unremitting cruelty of a very specific kind, where it's like there's a lot of this like, I guess I want to say narrative ableism. Like it feels like it goes beyond like just VRISKA, having a position that is cruel to Tavros as a result of like this, like, you gotta be stronger, which I do think that's what the narrative wants us to see, but like the way it's portrayed in text, that isn't really what we get. We get a lot of like this just very like cruel character that's like, it's not compatible with what we're asked to think about VRISKA outside of that. And it's like, I feel like it's one of the, like, there's instances in Homestuck where it's fairly clear from context, like, what the narrative wants us to think, but it's not compatible with what the text is actually, like, showing about the characters. And, like, I think VRISKA is one of those disconnects.
Exactly. Yes. I want to save some of my VRISKA stuff for later. So, if you guys have anything to add about VRISKA in Hivebent, we'll cover that, and then we'll move on to the next guy.
Oh, the next guy.
Oh boy, the next guy.
The next guy.
Daph's been quiet. I don't know if Daph's still here.
Yes, I am still here.
Oh, do you have anything to say about VRISKA?
Oh yeah, I have plenty of things to say about VRISKA. I have plenty of uncharitable things to say.
By all memes.
Yeah, go ahead. You have the floor. Here, I get you a floor.
So when I was in the SawCon server, I was all like, yeah, did you know that VRISKA is actually like a mean joke about the Mary Sue archetype? And people in there were all like, well,
Oh, that's
yeah,
huge.
well, people in there were all like,
I forgot
yeah,
about
you're
that.
just being mean to this character. And I was all like, I'm not going to talk about this character. If you,
She's not
yeah,
real.
I was,
She has no
I had to
feelings.
be all like, I'm not going to continue talking about this character if you guys can't actually talk about this. But that was actually,
I'm taking my VRISKA opinions and going home.
yeah, that's something that you,
No, I totally
it's
agree.
something that you have to concede when you're like, when you're going through Hivebent Act 1, ha ha ha. A lot of these characters are supposed to be taken at face value. A bunch of people who read the story at the time were initially really pissed that all of these trolls got introduced and that it wouldn't get back to like the main plot. That was the point, to piss people off. And somewhere that narrative thread
That's
got
true.
lost, and then VRISKA got contextualized as a revolutionary, which is completely impossible for a woman in her position to be. But as for VRISKA herself, if you want me to just talk about VRISKA in Act 1 of Hivebent, a lot of the class commentary I don't think is intentional until later on. Because, like I said, a lot of this was just surface level bullshit to piss readers off at the time. What Hussey did was he unintentionally created this racist, classist, hierarchical system, threw it at the viewers' faces, and for people who like the lore dumping and the character shit, like me, I like the character shit. I like the serious character introspection. Act 6 is my favorite act of Homestuck for that reason. There is a lot of serious character introspection, and I am here for that. But as for Act 5, my opinion about VRISKA is that she doesn't become an interesting character until Hussey basically kills her. That's why Act 6 VRISKA is ultimately like the best VRISKA in Homestuck. The dead one, she's honestly like the best character in Homestuck because she's the only character who has a complete character arc. Like, she follows that shit through to completion, and I think I shouldn't talk about this until we get to Act 6, but her conversation with herself, I think, is one of the most interesting conversations in Homestuck because it says
Yeah,
a lot
that's
about
huge.
Andrew Hussey's writing philosophies and how he thinks about other people and how he thinks about the concept of growing up, which ultimately, like, defeats Homestuck, which I don't think a lot of people understood at the time. Because people, I think, were just more mad that it was happening in the first place, because I guess they didn't want to confront the fact that Andrew Hussey had just all these fucked up ideas about what it meant to be alive that they now have to fucking deal with because of all the bullshit that happened these past several years.
I totally 100% agree. I have lots to say about VRISKA and parenthesis VRISKA. Like you said, we'll save that for the act when it actually comes up, because Act 6, I think, needs the most reconstruction, because it's when Hussey reckons with a lot of the things that, like, came up during the initial part. But lest we get bogged down with I would love to do an episode about VRISKA.
Oh yeah, that
And
would be
if you're
very
thirsty for more
yeah.
Vrisk content.
We always
that would
are.
be very
Everybody
productive.
is.
You know, you can we can do a bonus ep with VRISKA. We can get some more people in here. That'd be kind of fun.
8 people.
To round out the old VRISKA talk for now, did you have something to add, Bucky?
I was just gonna say 8 people is way too many for a podcast. That's a nightmare to edit.
Or is it exactly the right amount?
It is exactly
for
the right
VRISKA
amount,
episode?
but also it's a nightmare amount, which is appropriate
Yes.
for VRISKA.
Yeah.
That is-
Yeah.
yeah.
And we all have to like be playing TF2 while we're
Lest we get bogged down on that, let's talk about Equius, the sweatiest
yeah.
boy.
Must wait.
There's a distinct difference between what Equius is and what
What we
right,
want
I was gonna
Equius
say
to
what
be.
he should be, but really it's what I want him to be. Like the thing that I've been sitting on is like, what purpose does all of Equius's weird psychosexual racist bullshit have to do with the plot or like progressing his character or anyone else around him forward other than like indulging something the author wanted?
Yeah.
Like
I
it
don't
doesn't.
think it does. Like, it doesn't serve a purpose.
It tells us about Alternia, and it tells us about Andrew. If that's useful.
I think it does more of the latter than the former, but that's just
yeah.
because I
Okay.
want.
What do you want to have Equius?
Just like. No, see, I was gonna say Gamagori Ira from Kill la Kill, but that's almost worse.
Oh my god.
I
love that guy.
Glad I don't
If you
have
go looking for other
context for
Equiuses,
that.
you just find other freaks, like, and then you go, "Oh God, have
Alex-
they all been like this the whole
Alex
time?"
Louis Armstrong, but like I still want him to be weird.
Okay, that's
Okay.
badass. No, I totally agree.
Again, all of the Homestuck kids needs to be weird. Like, just that's all. Whatever archetype, you just put a thick layer of weird frosting on top. That's it.
All right, I got a suggestion.
Yes.
He can keep the horse porn, but they gotta take the dicks out. I don't want to see the blurred dicks. No, just no dicks.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was
Just make it
I have-
weird and
I
suggestive.
have something to say about the dicks.
Oh, Jojo, what do you have to say about the dicks?
So, I want to talk about this will come up later, but I think Equius is the best to talk about with this. All of the trolls are like archetypical internet weirdos in some way. Like Karkat is the guy who always talks in caps. Nepeta is like the furry, stuff like that. And a lot of those stereotypes became outmoded as the internet got older, except for Equius, because there's still the creepy guys, you know? Creepy guys is the most timeless archetype that Hussey basically made in both iterations of trolls, whether it be before or the trolls, the alpha trolls or the beta trolls that we see. And
I'm just saying, if there were 11 life preservers, I would drown Equius
Make
twice.
it 10. Make
There
it
you go.
10 and
I thought you were going to
kill
say I
Eridan
would
too.
toss all 11 of them.
I would,
Yeah, there
I
you
would
go.
pop all 11. Good luck.
There you go. But Equius is, I think, we can preserve that about him. We can preserve his weird guyness in a better way. Like, you know, most of the weird guys who you run into online are guys who will like. I guess here's what I want. I want him to be one of the guys who commissions porn. You know the guy.
Well, he is 13. Oh, wait, he's not 13 anymore. That's right.
No,
you guys,
we're
Yeah.
okay.
making them
No,
up.
there you go.
He's the guy
Yeah,
who
does make a lot
He's
of
a
the
rich
shit.
guy who loves porn.
It does make it easier to
That's
stomach.
it.
That's
his
it.
main character. I think that, like, okay, so I think that Equius, again, Equius in canon, I'm not, Equius in canon is fucking, I'm not
Oh.
gonna throw him in the trash.
Sorry, I just remembered who he, oh god, what the fuck is his name? The Magane from Oran High School Host Club. I need more of that.
Bucky, I'm not enough of a weeb to understand any of the
Oh,
things you're
yeah.
saying.
I know
Let-
who you're
let
talking
me,
about, and I forgot his name, but I know exactly who you're
Oh
fucking
my
talking
God.
about.
Scrimblo Bimblo.
No.
Yeah.
That definitely is real.
That's- fuck.
So there's some things about Equius. Sorry, Bucky. You can push me off the side of the deck of the ship we're podcasting on. When you remember. There's some things about Equius that aging him up makes it worse. Like the stuff with Aradia and the doll, and like the a lot of the stuff. Like when he's 13, you can sort of say that, you know, he doesn't know better. He's ultimately like it could be harmless. Like it's not great. It's a red flag, but you know, he's got time to understand the ramifications of his behavior. If he's 18 and he does that to Aradia and he does what he does to Gamzee and everything, that's a more malicious person in my mind.
More malicious.
So there is that,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you want to, I think it would be great if he could just kind of be like the misguided but ultimately harmless guy, and then like he's got some things he has to account and apologize for, but it's fine. You can keep your funny horseman, but then like, how do you do that when he's 18? That's a question. You could just be the creep and we throw him out. Like,
I'm just like I'm kind of like, yes, he still needs to be the weird guy because like there's always the weird guy. I think he still needs to be like the weird rich guy. So like him just just commissioning a lot of like muscle horse pornography is like exactly on brand. But part of me is like, maybe part of the way you could do it is instead of him being like upfront disgusting, you're really vague about it for a while. He's like very imposing, very like unsettling to talk to, just like sucks to talk to in general. Sweaty guy. All of that's like very obvious, but like the pornography is sort of like a looming cloud in the background where like he doesn't display the stuff with that's like really raunchy and like out. He has like what you could maybe in some worlds call tasteful iterations, and you like slowly like start like revealing that he's just like he's commissioning all of this weird pornography, but then like it turned, if you wanted to slowly build it up and then make it less weird, you could have it be that he's into something that's like weird but ultimately completely harmless.
Yes,
or
exactly.
you could.
You have to make.
There's things he does in the plot line, like in the series of events, like cause and effect that happen, that we need to like have an answer for. So like when he builds Aradia's body, like what does he do? Does he do nothing? Like what is that about?
I have an answer
like
for this
the way
that I have been thinking about ever since I saw the comic VRISKA Business, which is the unreleased Paradox Space comic, in which he is characterized by, instead of being characterized by being a weird sweaty guy, he's just kind of an introvert who doesn't really want to deal with things. And I like that interpretation of him a lot, because if you have him be like, if he's just making Aradia's body because he knows how to do robots and he like kind of likes Aradia and might have a crush on her, but not do with the weird programming her to love him thing, I think that would be fine. If you have him just be like kind of an inept, quiet weirdo who is like basically harmless and strong. So changing his he can still do all the stuff, but instead of being his motivations being weird, racist, or classist, we can just have him be like kind of inept.
Well, the sequel is like, I know this happens a little bit later, but it's motivated by things that are happening now. The reason that Gamzee kills Equius is because Equius is like messaging like this person for erotic roleplay who, like, to his knowledge, isn't consenting to that, and that's why he gets killed later, because Gamzee like goes like, why did I let you do that to me? I hate you. So then like what's the, you know, Gamzee's motivation later? Do we keep this part of this character and just make Equius work on that, you know, later?
I'm gonna write this down for Murderstuck, because I've got a bunch of notes for Murderstuck.
He's got a bunch of weird shit going on, because like in the comic, as it is, he's got all this, like, look how perverted he is kind of shit that's, like, again, I think that when you're doing a rewrite, the question is kind of like, to what extent do I want to keep this character the same? To what extent do I want to change it? And, like, what is the purpose and point of the changes you're making? So, like, Equius, again, going back to the sort of, like, class structure thing, Equius is in a position of, you know, comfort, security, socially. He can kind of do what he wants, doesn't have like some of the expectations that are placed on like the very top. So like it doesn't have the baggage of the Fuchsia Bloods, but like, you know, like what are you going to say with that? And then like I agree that like the stuff with him and Gamzee, like if you want to keep the fact that like Equius not being a great dude is fine, but like I think that again there's a level at which like it's like look how perverted he is, and like it gets to a point where it's like okay, we get it, like it's fine. It like the idea that he's like this kind of, you know, he's sort of the fucking the guy who commissions porn, I thought was actually kind of good, because it's like he's in this position to just sort of like
saying, let him keep the horses. Just please take the dicks out. That's too much.
He does what the fuck he wants, and like the problem with that is that he does what the fuck he wants. So like it's fine to have there be an undercurrent of like, no, he is kind of like a creep. I just think that like there's some stuff where it's like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you making it that explicit? Like, you're not... Yeah. If you want him to be, like, a little bit sympathetic, but also, like, to understand, like, Gamzee's feelings towards him, like, I think that keeping that sort of, like, he's the sort of, like, he's the entitled dude, I guess. Yeah. Like, he knows...
I don't think you can unhemoist him, unfortunately.
Yeah, no.
Because, like, it's too much of the character. It's, like, it's talking about what people in his position usually are, but you can, like, just, he's just kind of, like, really attached to the system that he's in. He's got,
that's a
like,
good
this
word
weird,
for it, attached.
Yeah, this weird, these hang-ups about it that come from, like, it not making a lot of sense to him.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much, like, he's talking about Aradia and Gamzee, and he's comparing them specifically for reasons they're kind of related to what we talked about in the last episode. Like, Aradia is supposed to be, like, the lowest, but he thinks, you know, she's super graceful, you know, it's that sort of thing. And then Gamzee, of course, is sort of eroticized in this other way. These are both objects of, like, his attraction.
Objects is the word for it, too.
Yeah,
yes.
Objects, and neither of them are good enough for him because they're both different kinds of racism. One is just like in the world building, and one is just like the text, and he's doing them both. He can't stop with one.
You know, I think it actually is better if they're 18. Because I think, unfortunately for Equius, it does need to be baked in. It does kind of need to be a little irreversible in order for him to work as a character. Because that's the position he's in, and that's why he ultimately does need to die, is because that... I don't think every person in his position is fundamentally irredeemable, but he's the boot soldier behind fascism. There's a reason that I compared him to Alex Louis Armstrong. It's because the Armstrong's money funded the entire, like, operation towards the end of the... Janaya hasn't finished Full Metal Alchemist. His money is important.
Will not make me dislike it.
Okay, his money is important, and the fact that he chose to be on what we consider the winning side is, like, sheer luck.
His death could be a turning point for him. That could turn him around. Yeah. I'll give the Equius fans that.
That's fair.
Yes.
He, like, disappears into the void. I think, like, he does literally need to, like... That's part of the function of death in Homestuck, is to go like, oh shit, that didn't work.
I actually, so, because I know we had sort of left that as an open question, but I had like a couple quick thoughts on like the character ages, Ascension, and then like I guess where Equius kind of fits into that. So like the age at which they go through Ascension is not, I don't believe is canonically mentioned, or it's like pretty vague because like we're working with like Friend Sim, and you know there's a lot of open questions. But like I think if you have them going through Ascension at like, okay, so they're 18 now, they're what, 9
Ascension
sweeps.
Being when they go off into space.
Yes, when they go off world, I'll be.
Old fandom would have called it conscription.
Yeah,
but old fandom was worse, if you can believe it.
So like I think if you have the idea that they go off world at 10 sweeps, they are in our rewrite 9 sweeps, so they're about to go like, so you get that kind of like existential, like everything is about to change for us in a very real, very permanent way. And like Equius as a character is someone that's embraced that. Like, he wants to be a part of the Alternian system. He likes Alternia. He likes his place in Alternia. And, like, I agree that, like, his death can be a turning point where it's like, oh shit, Alternia was bad, actually.
And unlike Karkat, who we talked about before, Equius belongs there. He is a high blood with no deformities. In fact, he is... he's a troll Aryan, basically. He's like strong and beautiful and muscular, and I know that's very charged, but
that's what the horse imagery is about.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Yeah, no.
So Momo, you have something
That's
to
what
say?
horses mean. I do. I thought about horses, and I kind of just I blanked out a little bit. So yeah, actually, this is good. Putting him right near Ascension, that kind of contextualizes some of his behavior towards Gamzee and Aradia, like trying to fill those quadrants because like you're supposed to, which I guess might help him make him be just a little bit more like I won't be upset if he comes back having learned something after dying.
Okay, I can't be charitable towards Equius at all. I think his plot in the story should be completely unchanged. I don't care. I don't give a shit.
Nice.
Like there's
I do
really
like
nothing
that
that
vibe.
Like there's really nothing that the character adds. There's nothing constructive about him at all. He only exists to represent this specific part of the system that is horrific and terrifying. And if you want my honest opinion of him, whatever happens to him in the story was rightly deserved.
Yeah. I do like Daft how you kind of counterbalance some of our more for lack of a better term, like idealism for Homestuck. I think we read a lot of things into Homestuck that we want to see, and part of that is, that's why this is a rewrite and not just a analysis. But I think it's good to sort of have that context of, you're right. At the end of the day, Equius is like, he represents something that is just, for lack of a better way to put it, hard to redeem.
Which is fine. Like I think that you like having him as like, because I feel like our portrayal of him in the rewrite is not like his only chance at redemption as far as what we've said, and I mean this in the loosest possible sense of the word redemption, is for him to die and move on. Like he doesn't have a place as an active participant in this story because he was so enthralled with the ideal of Alternia as this like glorious empire in a very like real, very fascist way, and like that isn't something you can just like walk back from. Like you would have to completely remake yourself as a person, and like this story isn't about Equius doing that. The only opportunity for Equius to do that in the story is to die and leave the story, and like there's a reson to do that. Like that's obvious.
I am actually writing a character like this. I'm gonna like obscure a bunch of details, but essentially, when you write a character like this, there are reasons. There are very hard and ugly and horrifying reasons why people are like that, and quite frankly, I think trying to save everyone when you have a character like that is just not feasible. So what should ideally happen is that there should be a real reason why the character dies. The real reason is in Homestuck, but the thing is about Homestuck is that it doesn't make it clear. It's hidden through a bunch of obfuscation, and that's why you have, like, sex predators who get away with being sex predators in the office.
God, yeah. There are so many people in the fandom who, like, used Equius's thing to normalize their own weird behavior to people.
That's true.
I think that actually, like, making it very clear what his role in the system is and that he is an enthusiastic supporter of it. Also, like, I think all of this serves to, like, because I know we're not there yet, but I know we're gonna get there when we hit everything with Gamzee that happens later, and like portraying Gamzee in an actually sympathetic light, and like this is part of that, where it's clear that like, what he's doing against Equius isn't just like, oh, Gamzee's evil murder clown. Like I think that there's like Gamzee represents as sort of like a reaction to this system that's exploiting and abusing him in such a very real, very tangible way, and using him to facilitate the existence of the system in the first place. Which I feel like making deliberate commentary on that is a lot better than having it be like up in the air, and like I think if we're going to portray Gamzee in a sympathetic light, which like literally all of us are on board with, I think that helps to contrast, like, this is what a supporter of the system looks like. Equius, and I would say the same thing about Eridan when we get to him. Like, they're
fuck
characters
that guy.
They're characters that are just like pretty cool with Alternia. Like, it works for them.
Yes. Rounding out Equius, I'm going to just summarize him and then we can move on to Kanaya, because Kanaya will be, I think, a big part of this. Equius is, I think, baffled by his own position, and he, much like VRISKA, is sort of struggling with a system that he likes, but has some things in it that are confusing. And I think Daft is right that, you know, this guy is, I don't know, maybe we should be less charitable to some of these guys who.
I
mean, he's a gross
I
dude.
get why. I get why you want the funny horseman. I think that would be great if that's what had happened. And if people want to do their funny horseman, you know, that's fine. But if we're looking at the story, this is what we have.
Yeah.
The problem is that people weren't engaging with the text objectively. They just wanted Homestuck for what they saw in it and not what was actually happening.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of the point of this rewrite, but I think it is important to keep in mind a lot of the themes that we have brought to this are themes that we have brought to this and not ones that are present in Homestuck as it was.
Yeah, the beginning Andrew a little too much credit. Like,
Yeah.
I think it stumbled upon a lot of things by accident, which is fine. A lot of good writing does that.
Yeah.
But, you know, you got to stick the landing, and you know, Homestuck didn't want to commit to anything.
But yeah, let's talk about, in a better note, Kanaya. And
Kanaya.
Since we'll start with Daft this time, just because, you know, we've been talking a lot.
That's sweet of y'all. That's very sweet of y'all. Okay, I think Kanaya is one of the most depressing characters on Homestuck. She is extremely unhappy with where she is as a person. She gets taken advantage of by the system. Not only does she get taken advantage of by the system, but she is literally being pushed into a fucking meat grinder in order to become the violent system. And it's so depressing. And then Porum comes in and says, actually, everything that happened to you was super good. And you should strive to reproduce the violent system. Don't think about it too much. And then Kanaya's all like, okay. And then the shit with Rose happens. Oh my god, why is Kanaya just this tragedy of errors? I do have a lot to say about Kanaya, but that should probably be held off in a section where we talk about Act 6 and Rosemary, because
We'll talk
my
about
goodness. Yeah, that relationship, I feel really bad for Rosemary, because I've talked about this a few times. I don't know how much into depth I've gone, but Hussey really did want Rosemary to be something. But unfortunately, because of the man he is, I think a lot of what he wanted Rosemary to be just ended up getting, like, shredded to fucking pieces. It's so fucking depressing. Like, especially as someone who's lived with parents with, like, substance abuse issues, it's the most fucking depressing thing I've ever had to sit through.
Yeah, like you say, we'll get into Rosemary. It really only kicks off in Act 6. I think this is in the same vein of Rosemary, though, where Kanaya, like Jade, gets kind of pushed away from the narrative despite being pretty important in it.
Yeah, Jade and Kanaya have this really wonderful little conversation that I've been holding on to this entire time, where Kanaya says, oh wow, it's really nice to be able to get to talk to a space player who actually understands what I'm going through and not some contentious asshead who is completely ingenuine with me all the time. And I have never forgotten that conversation. I think it's one of the most beautiful conversations in Homestuck, just because Kanaya and Jade, like, they get to exist for just that one moment. And I've always wished that Homestuck would revisit something between them, and it never did.
I fucking love. Oh my god. Okay, my brain has just activated, and I have to now suppress my deep urge to talk about Jade. Get into
the safe radius.
Yes, please. We can't talk about shipping. That is also have to be a bonus episode. In Act 1, or sorry, in the beginning of Hive Swap, I should say, Kanaya exists in a very unique space, I think, as opposed to the rest of the comic, basically, where she has a lot of autonomy, maybe not narrative relevance in terms of like what she actually does, but she has a lot of autonomy later. But in Act 5.1, she pretty much exists to prop VRISKA up.
Yeah.
And she becomes something more later, unlike a lot of the other female characters that Andrew Hussey writes. But I think talking about her in this act specifically will be interesting because, like, Kanaya, like, is Vriska's, like, bitch in this act. In no uncertain terms, like...
Ouch.
She is. I mean, you know, she is super hung up on VRISKA to the point where, like, she cries when VRISKA, like, kisses another person. And I think that's interesting because unlike a lot of other characters in Homestuck, she totally rejects that. When we see her later in Act 5.2, she's, like, not talking to VRISKA. She's like one of the
cold shoulder.
Yeah, she's one of the she is one of the only emotionally intelligent trolls, let alone
I mean,
what's that?
She didn't communicate. She did just kind of like ghost, and VRISKA didn't have any sort of explanation for that, for not meeting expectations Kanaya never made clear that she had. So I wouldn't call it that. Like, if we're looking for emotionally intelligent trolls, that's like Aradia and Tavros. Kanaya's a little messed up, but she has been messed up, you know, by the system. She has this iron will she uses to do, like, if you've read Animal Farm, she's Boxer. Like, if there's something that has to be done, she's gonna do it, because if not her, then who? So real deep cut, yeah.
Kanaya is the eldest daughter.
But she has an expectation on everyone else, and it kind of keeps her sometimes from being able to realistically emotionally connect with other people she cares about, because she can't really validate the problem she's actually going through. Like, things are weird between her and Rose for that reason. Things are weird between her and Karkat for that reason, where she's just like...
Thank you for reminding me. Karkat is the other component to... This goes totally... This is, again, we've talked about this, but this is me totally putting something on Homestuck. But Kanaya interacting with Karkat, I think, could have been enormous. Because it's just so wasted. What do you have to say, Bucky?
If everybody who says that Kanaya is... Like, okay, Tumblr latched on to the term mom friend, like... around, if not after, when Homestuck was popular. And that is wrong, because Kanaya is everybody's older sister. And...
Well, yeah, she's not an Earth mom, she's an Alternian mom. And an Alternian mom is very different.
Yeah. Like, I guess what I mean is, like, she...
It's very executive.
Yeah.
How she conducts herself.
Well, that's the thing, is, like, she has to be perfect all the time, so everybody else has to be perfect all the time, so nothing can ever be wrong, so she doesn't ever talk about it, which is the problem.
If you were going to have problems, I think you just wouldn't, honestly. I don't understand. What's the problem, Rose?
Right.
What's the problem, Karkat? What's the problem, Terezi? I just wouldn't have the problem. Just don't do that. And they're like, Kanaya, that doesn't sound functional. And she's like, no, I'm extremely functional. Thank you.
She'll have a mental breakdown in about 5 minutes. But
she will. She will have a mental breakdown in about 5 minutes.
She's the type of person who will, like, just go into her room, scream into her pillow, chew it up, absolutely, you know, obliterate it, and then, you know, come back out and be like, everything's fine. But please feel free to finish, Bucky. My apologies.
Yeah, no, sorry. I just wanted to say that like we had kind of settled into this trope that like because she was the mom friend, she was a mom, and like but the way that she is just like the like most responsible girl in the friend group that everybody just sort of dumps everything onto because she's already taking everything anyway. She's already been doing that consistently the whole time. It's just kind of standard procedure. If you don't hand it to her, she's probably going to take it.
Yeah.
And that's particularly with regards to absorbing an amount of Karkat's emotional dumping, because she's not talking about her shit. And like that, but like the relationship is not mother-son with them. It's always been like sibling bullshit because she's like busy propping up the rest of the family, so of course she's talking to her like younger brother or whatever.
She doesn't really believe in Karkat's problems. She doesn't believe in anybody's problems, unfortunately. Like,
Including her own.
Including her own, especially not her own.
She's not solving shit for him. She's just letting him ramble on.
She's like, oh, don't worry, I don't respect you.
I would like to, so Janaya is sort of the resident Kanaya expert, and so we'll leave it over to Janaya and sort of, leap behind something sturdy.
Yeah, so Kanaya is a character that I think, in much the same way as VRISKA, a lot of the kind of core issues with the character in canon aren't necessarily like how she's introduced in Hivebent, but then like how that's, taken and what's done with it. And like, I feel like, so Kanaya represents this kind of like very specific part of the Alternian system. She represents this kind of like, the concept of reproductive labor in the sense of like class reproduction and like literal reproduction of the species. Like she has this very defined duty. She has a very defined position within society, and like it's something where like I think that showing that and showing her as being someone that's like, yeah, this is fine, everything's fine, I need to be fine all the time, like that's a good introduction to the character. But then like what needs to happen later on is that you need to repudiate that. So like just like VRISKA needs to like learn to be okay, Kanaya needs to learn to have like real agency, not like, oh, I'm the responsible one agency, because that is just, for her, it's a form of control. It's control dressed up as volition and agency. And like, I think that that's really powerful and interesting, but like the way canon does it is it just kind of like downplays her and makes her into a fucking prop and like shuffles her off. So yeah, I would keep a lot of things the same in Hivebent, but like use that as a basis for more than canon did.
Space players become really susceptible to logic of like practicality. Like Jade was promised, oh no, what you're doing, you have to do this because it's really important, even though it sucks. And Kanaya was kind of promised the same thing. Yeah. And she just accepts like this logic of utilitarianism in that way from Alternia a lot. Watching her actually work through that would be cool.
I
agree.
It occurs to me that Jade had a lot of fulfilling relationships with a bunch of people, i.e. people who weren't Dave and Karkat, but the relationships with Dave and Karkat were hyper-focused on, and they gave her trauma.
Yeah, I like, because like Kanaya is basically like the promise of if you're very like good and supportive, then you will be rewarded in some way. And like the bottom line is that Alternia in particular, and like imperialism generally, doesn't ultimately reward you for being a good citizen. It punishes you. And like Kanaya is a good example of that, where she's like,
what are you talking about? I'm a great citizen. I'm citizening very well.
She is, that's the thing. She is a good Alternian. She does exactly what she's supposed to.
Yeah, that's why Karkat loves her.
Yeah, and she gets fucked for it. And like, and I think that having her be able to like openly work against that and learn that it is like, to have her recognize how fucked up that is, and then to actually be able to take back some power. Like the thing that I think is the weakest point is where Kanaya doesn't get to like she kind of gets to do it, like with the whole thing with Aridin and becoming a rainbow drinker. And then it's like, okay, well, she had her girl boss moment.
No.
Now
I've had enough, thank you. I've done enough girl bossing for today. I'm full, thanks.
Now back to being a prop for the narrative. And I like, just like with Jade, and we'll talk about that when we talk a bit more about Jade, I think that we should maybe not do that. Because, like, these are very strong characters that, like, deserve to be able to, like, address the issues that their respective systems that they were brought up in present to them.
Super depressing that Kanaya never got to like look at the system that she was a part of and say, this system is bad and I will separate from it. Instead, she got told the complete opposite. This system is good and you should conform into it as much as possible. Your agency is not important to us. That also reminds me, that's actually the reason that she and Terezi are like objects of like ideation to Karkat. They're so they reproduce the system so good and so well that Karkat is always chasing their approval. Because if Karkat wasn't a mutant, I doubt he would be interested in being friends with them.
Bucky, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think it's we've been dancing around it, but I want to like state it outright for not just Kanaya but everybody. The point of this is to set up the looming tragedy coming later. So like it's important to set up both like how we want these characters to like at the ends of their arcs finally deal with their shit, but we still have like a whole tragic event to get through to get there, and having them like setting up what that fatal flaw is going to be is very important. So like Kanaya's,
that's good.
It doesn't have to be one, but like they have shit going on that is like we get the Alternians after we're introduced to the humans, but they came before because they failed, and we know they failed, but and the way it's presented, the dramatic irony is through the meta layer of they're telling it back to people who already they're telling it back to people who are just learning about it for the first time, like the audience, but it's already happened. It's like almost Shakespearean, and the almost so it does something interesting in that regard, but like it is important to remember that like all of these characters are going to fail in some way, and many of them die even if they recover from that. The allegory of game over in this rewrite, I don't know, I can't speak to the actual comic. Is not even game over. Like Kanaya gets
not game over, but murder stuck.
Murder stuck, yeah.
Murder
the
stuck,
allegory of that is to me the failure of the imperialist sort of Alternian system. Where did these people go wrong? Because these are all nuggets of that system, and they are all finally coming into contact with a conflict between all of each other on the meteor. And we'll get into that more next time, of course. I really like that. That's very insightful to what we're sort of trying to do here. Make Murder Stuck mean more. Make it a red wedding instead of just.
And also what I forgot to say is like they failed even though their session was supposed to be engineered to be successful because of Doc Scratch.
Yes.
And like
Huge.
really nailing down that like did not fucking work, I think is important.
Yes. Yeah. It's implying that like the powers that be can't be trusted.
That's a little off topic from Kanaya, which is fine. I think that was a great comment.
It all comes together later when the point being that we are leading to, despite her best efforts, Kanaya dies, and she dies in a way that is represented by her reproductive organs, or where they presumably would be if trolls are at all humanoid, being removed from her body, along with like everything else in front and behind it.
The next two trolls are Aridin and Fevri. And I think in terms of Act 5.1, we can talk about them together because they exist together for the most part. Again, in this act, not necessarily going forward, because there are. So I'd like to address up top. There are a couple things that Fefri does on her own, which are, start the dream bubbles, and stuff like that later on. But for right now, Eridan and Fefri exist to be like the ruling class of this society in a way. Obviously, the ruling class explicitly is the Condess, and then beyond her, Doc Scratch and Lord English. But Eridan and Fefri represent like the highest strata of troll society as it exists. So before we get into the rest of Hivebent and the sort of final things, I think, which will be troll romance, which will be very exciting to talk about, we'll talk about Eridan and Fefri. Daft, didn't you have something specific about Fefri? I don't remember. I might be remembering something wrong.
The Condess is black, so Mina, and so Fefri is black. She's a fucking mammy. She's a minstrel. Jesus Christ. You know who Aunt Jemima is?
Yes.
Well, Fefri is essentially that. So her idea of an ideal society, her Herman Caning it up, is God. To like basically recreate eugenics, but really, really nicely with this
cuddly
like
eugenics.
Cute little smile. Yeah. Which I don't want to blame Fefri for this because it's not her fault she was born into the system. I think the way Homestuck Homestuck has this weird fucking. Homestuck has this weird fucking. Homestuck is very, very strange with the way it handles ideology and complacency. Like, Fefri is already dealing with a lot. She's one of the most loaded characters in Hivebent, and that's something that people never really acknowledge. All they talk about is her being this boring throwaway character, when if you look at her story, like, she is in a power struggle with the Condess right now. She is one of the few, she is the only Harris to take control of Glub Glub away from the Condess. So that means that the Condess will actually have to come back and challenge her for the throne, and which is a really, really scary prospect for a 13-year-old to be dealing with.
Yeah.
I just sincerely don't understand how people can look at Fefri and go like, yeah, she's responsible. This scared child who is doing everything she can to fix the system in the worst way possible is responsible for it. Like, it's so fucking baffling. And she has to deal with Eridan's bullshit, and like it's so fucking wild how Homestuck just can look at this 13-year-old girl and say she's the problem.
And saying that the problem is that she's an incompetent nurturer is also like super fucking loaded and racist.
She's 13. She's fucking 13.
Yeah.
She's a kid. Oh, sorry, Janaya.
Well, I was gonna say, they're like being aware of these issues in the context of the rewrite, because like we are making a new version of the story, but like we're still starting from kind of the same base point. And like one of the things, like, because I've been talking a lot with folks about the fuchsias in general for reasons, and like I think that their position in Alternia is very interesting, but like in canon, there's a lot of like weirdly racist bullshit that gets tossed in there, and like just like kind of incoherent stuff that gets tossed in there. And I like the idea that like the fuchsias are kind of like pulling back the veil on the fact that ultimately all of this is being manipulated and controlled in a way that is representative of like how a system works. Like, Alternia isn't bad because the Condess is the Empress. Alternia is bad because it's a system that has an Empress. And like I would be more sympathetic in the narrative that we're creating to the Condess as well. Like, you know, the fuchsias are ultimately like, they're very beholden to like, they have two choices. They can either play the game the way that Doc Scratch wants them to, or they can die. And like, the game and this whole thing that happens is representing a kind of like a third alternative. And like, I think that Pfeffrey being aware of this like fucked up situation that she's in, and like not necessarily knowing what to do about it, like rather than having her be this like weird like Daft was saying, this kind of racist archetype, is like, maybe have her be a character that has a little more like agency and volition and like a little more self-awareness, you know, and like a dawning awareness of the system that she is nominally supposed to be leading, and how fucked up that is.
Yes. Bucky, did you have something?
Yeah, God, I have like a couple things. Like, one, we each them up. So for Pfeffrey, that the choice that Janai was talking about is imminent. It is looming. It's looming and it's imminent, and it's looming and imminent because Alternia is bad because Doc Scratch, and by extension the misogynistic forces of, God, I don't fucking know, the anti-narrative. Is that what Lord English and Caliborn is? The narrative, but also is not the narrative, but also is the narrative, because that's fun. Because that's just sort of how it works, I guess. It's the antagonist, but it's also supported to be at least sort of correct in what it's doing several times by the text.
He's the answagonist.
Yep, that's sure, absolutely. So I don't know. I think it is important that like Pfeffrey is very carefree, and the original behaves in a way that seems to be carefree in the original. Wants to put on airs of things being pretty okay. And I think it might be more interesting to see a Pfeffrey where that is much more obviously a facade for whatever she's feeling about what's coming on, because like that was always the big joke about Pfeffrey, and like Pfeffrey was like introduced later and like barely got any screen time other than to be like weird to Jade, and then be a prop for Solix and Eridan to fight over and all of that shit, and then it was a joke that she didn't talk anymore, along with Nepeta, that these two particular women didn't talk anymore, and that kind of sucks. So I think it'd be interesting to set up how she feels about like death or being Empress oncoming, because maybe she is a little bit more or less idealistic. I think her being idealistic is important, but like, how does she feel about that now that like death is really close? And then maybe not setting her up to be a joke later, and have, or if you're going to say that like she's done her part in the narrative, like give her a proper send off instead of having her hang around as a joke. That would be cool.
Yeah, that goes for, I think, Nepeta as well.
Yeah,
like we talked about last episode. I realized that I brought up Eridan, and I think we skipped over Eridan, which is, in my opinion, fine. I don't really care about him. I think that Eridan, I do want to address, these are all good points about Pfeffrey. I think Eridan does need to be sort of reckoned with in some way, even if it's just like a sentence.
I have a sentence after your sentence.
Here, write me into Homestuck. I'll write me into Homestuck. I'll get out my gun and I'll shoot him in the head.
All right, so that'll be the rewrite. We'll put Daft in it. We'll make Daft the fifth beta kid.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Fellow beta kids. It is I, Daft Class.
Yes.
They will be like, oh shit, it's Daft!
Daft's the best one, and then they'll all like spend a couple pages talking about how cool you were and like all the cool stuff they've done with you. And but all I have to say about Aridin is I don't like him, but I don't like him in a way that I think works, and that is he is the perfect encapsulation, more than any of the other characters, of Alternian society at large. And I think that is why, again, this is reading themes that I invented wholesale onto Homestuck, but I think he is the main murder-stuck guy because he is the representative of Alternia. He is the Alternian. All of them except Aridin have some nugget of like, well, maybe
let's not reconcile with Jack Nor. Let's resist.
Yes.
And Aridin's like, no.
Aridin is the only Alternian who the system unambiguously works for. Like even Equius or VRISKA, who are very high class, they realize in this very cognitively dissonant way, like something's wrong, and then they can realize that later. But Aridin can't have that. Aridin is the Alternian, and I think that's fine for him. I think it means that we can't really give him much depth because he is, in that rewrite scenario, an antagonist now, instead of just he's the death of hope. That's all I have. Janaya, you can continue.
Yeah, so I think that like all of the Violets in the story, except for Cronus, we'll talk about Cronus when we get to Cronus.
We'll talk about Cronus.
We'll not get into that right now. So, like, specifically, so, like...
I'll deal with you later, Cronus.
So, Aridin, like, I agree with what you're saying, because, like, basically, so you have characters like VRISKA and Equius who represent this, like, they want the system to work for them to varying degrees. Well, VRISKA doesn't, but Equius sure does. And, like, it kind of doesn't work for him at the end of the day. Theferi is a character that represents, like, this sort of dawning awareness of, like, even though she's nominally, quote-unquote, at the top of the system, that, like, the system itself is the issue, and, like, it's going to destroy her as surely as it destroys everyone else, no matter how high up she theoretically is. Whereas Aridin, like, I think that Aridin provides an interesting contrast to Theferi, where he is the one he's fully embraced the system as it exists, and like he wants to serve the system. He wants the system to continue to exist and to be perpetuated. He wants to be a part of that, and I think that works very well with his role in Murderstuck. That works very well with his role like in the narrative, and I don't think you can like turn him into this like, we're not going to do the fandom Aridin that's like really, really nice inside and actually is a super nice guy that's just misunderstood. Like, he is a character that has embraced a very negative and very harmful system wholesale. And I think like having a character like that is fine. Just like, again, doing it intentionally and having it mean something in the narrative.
He's just everything about Equius, but worse in a million ways. Like that, like that's basically already what Janaya and JoJo said. But like if Equius is like a foot soldier behind fascism, Aridin just like is doing it. Like he's almost at the top of the fascism, and he's having a great time up there. I agree with Janaya that I think he could be less sympathetic. Like, I feel like there may or may not have been reasons for instance, somebody affluent from New England to, like, have more sympathetic feelings towards Aridin, but, we don't need to be. Because I don't feel a lot of sympathy for people in his position in society, which is, again, at the top of the fascism.
Yeah. I mean, down to the things he wants. He wants to build doomsday devices. Like, he has contempt for the lower class. A lot of people online, I want to address this. A lot of people online have read a lot of charitable things into Aridin, including the sort of trans femme stuff in PesterQuest, but I don't buy into that. I really don't think so. I think he's just a bad guy.
To be fair, the your gender identity has absolutely no bearing on your morality as a person. But I don't. There's delving into your fascist is also a part of your trans
Diversity win.
Yeah,
Diversity win.
Oh,
fuck. Dicey move.
I maybe would not do that personally.
Yeah, we don't need that.
And again, it is slightly different when you have a character who's 18, where this has been baked in more significantly. But also, again, it's relevant that it's baked in. Also, I think Mama.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, Eridan's thing about the ocean is not environmentalism. It's believing like the lower castes and poor people are a pestilence on the earth. That's the metaphor. That's why it's a Faygo bottle. Like the Faygo bottles, is associated with like lower class people. That's why juggalos drink it. It's cheap. So it's like there's a lot with. Sorry, I'll do all my Eridan stuff because it's quick. So there's a metaphor going on with Eridan about magic. And magic, I think, represents, like, externality, like, other ideologies outside of the Alternian ideology. Gamzees is external to, like, the system, the subjuglators. They believe in a higher power, they believe in something outside of the system. And, he flirts with that a little bit, but he doesn't buy into it. And, even Kanaya, who also kind of finds some of this appealing, she gives him the wand. The reason that wand ends up killing her is because she doesn't realize that this is not a person you can collaborate with. Like, he's not genuinely interested in this stuff. Like, he covets it a little bit just because he wants everything.
I agree. That is the spirit of imperialism, is desiring everything.
Also, the stuff with Jack Noir is absolutely him ultimately being a coward because fascists are cowards, but it's also at least a little bit about an excuse to murder a girl who wouldn't go out with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's like a stronger force that appears, you just align with that because that's the logic of power.
So.
That's what the hope aspect is about, that people don't want to.
And then finally, Daft had some stuff to talk about the transformative things.
Okay, so in 2011 there was this Homestuck team member who put out this calendar, and it had a drawing of Eridan in drag.
March Eridan.
Yeah, it was.
That's the legacy this shit has.
That's where the trans femme Eridan stuff starts, and we're gonna go to fucking Pester Quest. So in Pester Quest, Eridan is supposedly GNC, and Solix has this one line that killed me upon impact. My guts exploded on the floor, and I wanted to die. He says, "Oh wow, Eridan sure does support all these causes that he doesn't believe in." And I had to look at that line. I had to squint my eyes. I had to look at that line. And I know the person who wrote that line. Not personally, but I know who wrote that line. And I know a little bit about them. And it made sense that the person who created the root would write that line. Not only because Pester Quest is trying to be this reappropriative take on Homestuck, which to an extent,
It's Hamilton for Homestuck.
Yeah, I appreciate what it's trying to do to an extent, but the problem is, the problem with Pester Quest is that it's extremely uncritical of the actual problems of Homestuck, and therefore, because it was created by the people who created Homestuck, it was never going to be a solution to the problem, and all it did was patronize people super fucking hard.
It cherry-picked all of the best fan interpretations of the characters to be in the least charitable routes, I suppose, or not the least.
Air quotes, best.
I need to share what Janaya just dropped in chat.
Are you gonna sing it? Are you gonna sing it? Are you gonna sing it?
No,
Sing it.
I've never seen Hamilton, and I severely fucking despise the idea that like the founding fathers were anything but like these just time capsules of the worst things about like everything that existed in the past. And I have this deep hatred for Alexander Hamilton as a musical and as like an American project, and sort of that's the context in which I read to you the following two words that Janaya has just dropped in chat here. And I quote, Alexander Hussington. All right.
His name
Why do you
is
write like you're running out of
Alexander
time?
Yes.
Write day and night.
Next
running out of time.
Next time on our rewrite project, we're gonna rewrite
No, we're
Hamilton.
not.
I'm just kidding.
Oh no,
No,
yeah.
No,
Well,
we're not.
America
gonna fucking do
Squared
that.
Beyond
I
Canon.
I am going to.
Riff
I'm
and I
gonna-
already
The
did that. You
circle
can
of
go listen to it
stupidity
and die.
Complete.
All right.
I can't
Okay.
escape it.
This
Fuck.
sucks.
I'm gonna fucking dox all of you. I'm going to come to all
As the
of your
woman who made
houses.
the America Squared Beyond Canon graphic, I am deeply sorry.
Thank you for that. I made Lin-Manuel
I
Miranda.
made
with
the one with the
VRISKA.
Egbert mouth.
So, oh yeah.
None of us
I'm
are
fucking
without
doxing
sin, is the
all of
bottom
you.
line.
You are all getting fucking
Well,
doxed.
before we get doxxed,
Well, that's okay.
Yes.
Before that,
let's take a diversion from the trolls as they exist, because the trolls are not the only thing that go on in Act 1. Obviously, we've talked about the plot points in the last episode, but this episode, excuse me, my body is trying to reject what I'm about to say. Let's talk about troll romance. What do you guys make of that?
I get upset and nervous.
I would like to say something about troll romance, because I have
something.
not discussed much about troll romance, so my opinions on it are untainted by whatever discourse has been going on.
Oh yeah, me too. Same fucking brain cell. I literally don't give a shit about what other people say about it.
I personally think it... So here's my understanding of troll romance. I understand it very well because I've read Homestuck and I talk to people who do write Homestuck, but
And your brain is huge.
I don't know... Thank you. I don't know any, like, fandom takes on it. However, this is what I have... This is my opinion. I think a lot of elements of it are good and should be kept. For instance, the idea of, a healthy rivalry or a soulmate that is not sexual. But there's a lot of stuff that sucks and is underexplored. For instance, Kismesises as they exist on Alternia as being like just sort of abusive partners. And then the entire quadrant of
Clubs?
what's it called?
Yeah, auspices.
Auspices.
The Ashen Quadrant?
The Ashen
Auspicization.
Platonic Quadrant. Yeah, there we go. So I don't look like a jackass trying to pronounce these words. I think this could be easily fixed by just broadly simplifying what the fuck these things mean. So instead of this sort of cerebral bullshit that needs to be explained over the course of what is like, twice, over what is the course of like, paragraphs and paragraphs of just exhaustive explanation, I think you can really boil it down to like, they have 4 types of romance that are not like biological in nature. They're just a social construct that they've made. And one is love as we know it. One is rivalry as we know it. One is
Wait.
incredibly close friendship as we know it. And then the final Ashen Quadrant just totally
So
gets
what you're
rewritten
saying
as like,
is that Sasunara is canon.
a platonic rivalry, I guess.
I hate you. Also, I do have some thoughts on the quadrants. So, I think I would change a couple of things. And most of it is, like, procedural, not necessarily, like, how they are portrayed, because how they're portrayed is very open-ended and a little vague. And that's fine. You don't need to rigorously define everything. But the thing is, like, one, I would make the way that the quadrants are explained more in the actual narrative and in the character interactions rather than just these lore dumps, because those are never a great time. And the other thing is, like, okay, so a few things. I don't agree with changing the Ashen Quadrant to be, like, a platonic rivalry. I think that it is an interesting concept of this, like, facilitative person, but, like, again, you don't need to get too bogged down in the technicalities. The other thing I would do is make it clear that, like, the rigid enforcement of the quadrants is a system of control. Like, the quadrants are a tool to describe relationships, but then they are used as a tool of imperialism to strictly control the way that people behave. So like I think that that's something that's like gets kind of like mixed around, where it's like, oh, the quadrants are fake. It's like, yeah, they describe things. They describe real things, and like that's valuable. But the Empire then uses them to force people to behave a certain way. And I think like that particular plot point is important because again, it shows the extent of the Alternian Empire's control, where it's like it even controls who you get to like care about and how.
I'm a bad Homestuck fan. I don't really care about quadrants as like a legitimate world building thing to define relationships because I don't think they work like that. Like, at least not in the story. If you want to do that like outside the story, that's great. But like, I just can't take them seriously because they're never represented that way. Like, the story doesn't actually care about what like a good pitch relationship would look like or what an Ashen relationship would look like. It's a troll. It's a joke. Like, it's all a farce. But what the quadrants are doing, they're kind of a narrative contrivance, and they're a gesture and a shorthand for certain attitudes the narrative has, like, on these characters. Like, the pitch, we don't see a lot, but that's sort of, like, implying one of these characters is going to have to go down, like, sincerely go down. And the pale relationship is, like, promising something about the future. It's like saying that these characters are soulmates, and that it like tries to unpack her like who gets that validation keeps moving around, and it's like never right because Homestuck is stupid. So like the idea of like soulmates and who deserves intimacy and who deserves relationships, that's more about like the characters as they relate to the narrative's existing prejudices than it is any actual opinion about like whether or not that relationship is platonic. Gamzee did not have like platonic interest in Karkat, in my opinion, and the opposite is also true. Yeah,
I agree. I think that, like Janaya said, I'm going to synthesize what you both said into, I think the idea of troll romance should be, instead of a lore dump, instead of something that is implied to be, you know, biological about them, as it is in the comic, which is because we see that there are two different like genetic materials that the trolls make due to these different attractions, which I think is total.
It just shuddered.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's bullshit.
Why
it's
do we need
pointless.
to
It
see
doesn't
that?
serve anything.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we like Janai was saying, we should keep it as a social force. And it's fine if that's fine. You know, another a sort of hyper real America, which Alternia, as we've said, is, we can have some kind of, you know, more in-depth relationship thing, but we should also make it clear this is not like some kind of necessity. Like, I've seen people say, like, with Homestuck 2, for instance, people say, well, you know, Rose didn't cheat on Kanaya because Terezi and her were like in a pitch relationship.
Yeah,
and it's
she
like,
did
no,
cheat.
but like,
She cheated because Homestuck doesn't take quadrants seriously. Like, quadrants are a joke.
Yeah, like the whole again, the whole issue with the original deal was that it hated the characters, it hated you, it didn't care what you thought, and the whole thing was to piss you off because Mo was right. It was a troll, it was a joke, it was never serious, and like I guess the decision that we have to make here is it still a troll, a joke, a jape, and completely unserious, or do we take it more seriously?
I like the joke, but you do have to dismount. You know, you have to like be sincere eventually.
I have so this is my thing. There's this sort of phenomenon that has happened in the Homestuck community where people will define themselves or their friends as being in quadrants with each other. I've seen this especially with Morails. I've even called someone my Morail in my past, who I'm still friends with. And what I like about that is that, unlike what Hussey says, it is very easy to understand what these quadrants entail for us humans. And so making it be that sort of sociological force instead of a biological one as it is in the text, we can sort of say, you know, the humans could get a hold of this and be like, you know, well, June could be like, well, Dave is, I'm platonic with him, but he's like my bro. I love him a lot, and I didn't have a word for that before. And having that be a force, not just like for the trolls, because that's what it is in the text. I think it would be good to still have those quadrants, because I think it is interesting at the very least. But having them be... Bucky, your question was, should we have it be a joke or should we have it be something serious? And I think the answer is, like, we should pull it in both directions. We should have it be serious in that it is legitimized in the comic, but a joke in that, like, it's clear that this does not have some hard and fast hold over their biology in some way.
Serious.
Janaya says... Janaya has
my brief
hot
hot take is that in our rewrite, we don't actually need to talk about, like, the specifics of, like, troll reproduction in detail. Like, that's actually not really, like, serving much of a narrative purpose. And, like...
That was definitely a troll. That was nonsense to piss people off, and then people were like, I'm gonna produce so many image boards about
we
this.
don't, all the bucket stuff and all of that, like, it's not necessary in any way, and, like, you can use the space in the narrative that is occupied by that to do, like, more sincere world building.
I do want to...
Eggman, you posted cringe.
I do want to push back on that in one way. I do think that a lot of the more, like, porn bait aspects of it were bad, but I think some of the reproduction is very well realized in that, like, Kanaya wanting to... The mother grub is basically what I'm saying.
The
like,
stuff about, like, the mother grub and the stuff that is actually plot relevant, like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the buckets and the paling and all that other shit that's,
okay.
like, only there to fuck with the audience. Like, that is, yeah, like, the stuff that has...
I get what you're saying.
Right, like, the stuff that's relevant to, like, Kanaya's journey, the mother grub, the parallels that you make to the frog breeding later on, the reestablishment of the troll race, etc. Like, yes, that matters, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think the bucket stuff is funny, but like Bucky was saying, we need to make that a joke and not, like, something essential about the trolls.
Like, again, as a general, a lot of that was established through lore dump, which, again, like, again, the saying is tell not show. Other than the lore dump, if it sounds like something Karkat would use as an insult, then it should remain a joke. And if it literally is something Karkat uses as a joke or an insult, we don't need to take it seriously. I think it's just, like, my rule going forward.
That's true. Momo, what did you have to say about that?
I don't want to completely drain all the character out of Homestuck. Like, it is supposed to be the dick's last resort of webcomics, and I get that. But, like, deep down, you gotta, like, it's gotta be a bit. And the problem with Homestuck, with this, with, like, the romance thing, with a lot of stuff, it's just, it's not a bit. It came to define the entire experience, and, like, everyone's always nasty and fighting and arguing and pissed off, and it's Homestuck's fault, because it didn't realize this was supposed to be a bit. It's like you try and leave the restaurant, and the guy follows you home. And breaks into your house.
It's either a bit or people are going to cons spitting in buckets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yikes.
That's why you can't fuck around with this stuff. You're gonna get the con bucket.
I think that... let's just take a moment. I think Hussey's greatest claim to fame was getting gray paint banned from conventions across the globe. Good job, buddy. You did it.
Daft, do you have any quadrant thoughts? Any thought-drints?
Hello, everyone. So Alternia has a polyamorous romance system. They have a polyamorous society. However, Andrew Hussey goes out of his way to... Like, the most blatant example of this, and this does actually happen in Homestuck, is where Dave and Gamzee are quote-unquote heavy quotes, because Gamzee is not dating Terezi consensually. You have to remember that Arania is responsible for this arrangement. Gamzee and Dave are both dating Terezi. Terezi goes behind Dave's back, and she explicitly says that she does this because she doesn't expect him to understand it. Then Dave confronts her about it, and he's all like, yeah, you're right, I don't understand it. I don't want to see you anymore. Goodbye.
Homestuck, you see, like, all the characters that get respect eventually either drop the quadrant system or, like, they just do regular human monogamy anyway.
Yeah, well, that's the problem to me, is you have this polyamorous system, just like Daff said, but then with, it's like monogamy nested inside of like, special polyamory. What the fuck is up with that?
Homestuck goes out of its way to, like, shit on everything that isn't, like, adherent to the principles of Americana. And I find that a very disturbing ideal for a comic that basically appropriates the language of revolution for its own nefarious purposes. You want to know why it appropriates the language of revolution? Because Andrew Hussey just wants to normalize his own bad behavior. That's the only fucking reason.
Mm-hmm. Homestuck wants to normalize everything it does retroactively. It never wants to admit that, like, anything was bad.
Yeah, so we've been talking about, or I've been talking about at least, Alternia as a hyper-real America. And if there's like a concept that people talk about when they're talking about sort of social norms of Earth 0, Earth 1, and Earth 2, where, you know...
Ah, another philosophy tube watcher, I see.
Yes. Oh, yeah, the Philosophy Tube did talk about this in their recent video, I think, or in one of their recent videos. But there's this idea that you can take away certain traits or add certain traits to a hypothetical society that looks like ours to say something about it, basically. And in adding polyamory or a more complicated, and I would say more theoretically sophisticated system of love and personal relationships, where things are more specifically defined in a way that is good and tells you where you stand and is less ambiguous than the one we have. It can show us a lot about what's fucked up about our system, but really, Homestuck doesn't do anything to that nature. All it does, in Hivebent, there's a lot of time devoted to explaining why the trolls are aliens. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think you're saying that, like...
how are they different? How are they weird? Et cetera, et cetera. All these lore dumps about, like, what they are materially. Which I think is not great, because at the end of the day, they are just people.
Yeah, like, in the best case scenario, I think what you're saying is, like, Alternia should be the Earth 2 that shows what's ridiculous about our society. Like, yeah, Alternia is a farce, Alternia is stupid and ridiculous, but so is Earth.
Right. It is ridiculous in the same ways that Earth is, but they have that added layer of ridiculousness. Instead of, we take over countries because we want oil, Alternia is just like, Alternia does the same thing plus some ridiculous amount. They go out and conquer the galaxy for who knows what.
I feel like the especially with the changes we're making about, like, being a little more, like, direct and intentional with how some of these characters are presented, that, like, we have a situation where it's like Alternia is America writ large, and, like, we're making it very clear from our organic narrative structure that Alternia is America writ large. Like, you don't have to have, like, so much of the don't forget they're aliens, this is all a joke. Like, you can kind of, like, have more of that be implicit through the characterization and the dialogue and the exchanges, rather than relying so heavily on lore dumps and exposition, which I think both strengthens its presentation as a narrative aspect because it's more organic, and also, like, frees up some of that space that you're using, or, like, makes it more streamlined as an experience. So, like, you don't have to be so, like, on the nose about, like, shoving it in the reader's face, because you've introduced it more organically. You've introduced it in a way that's, like, puts a little bit of trust in the reader to figure some of this stuff out. Like, oh, I'm picking up on these things because they keep getting mentioned by the characters, rather than, like, okay, now Karkat's going to sit down and explain.
Yeah, you can have those absurd situations come from... I think one of the most effective things that is funny about Trollian culture and human culture colliding. And one of the things that works the best is not anything in even Act 5 when they're explaining all this shit. It's in Act 6 when John like puts all the notes into a bucket and then it hits Karkat in the face, and that's funny because we know that buckets are used as, you know, the packages which trolls mail come to the mother grub with. That's a sentence I just said, huh?
Yeah, you sure did.
That's a bunch of words that
like
made sense.
It's a payoff of like it's an actual payoff of something at least. I don't know
Yes,
if it's
Sometimes things are setups for elaborate dick jokes, so that's okay.
yeah.
Yes, that's fine. You know, it's also and I think that if I'm being pretentious, that does advance the sort of laughing at that, at how silly it is and arbitrary it is for Karkat to be freaked out by a bucket. That, you know, we're freaked out by stuff all the time. We're freaked out by, like, we see a dick, we fucking laugh our asses off as human beings. You know, we see like a phallic thing. We see someone eating a hot dog. We just start pointing and laughing at them on the street.
Yeah. That's a normal
everyone
thing.
does that. That's
happens
totally
a lot.
normal.
Jojo, did someone laugh at you on the street when you were eating a hot dog? That was kind of fucked up.
What?
Oh, okay.
Wasn't on the street anyway.
Oh, anyway.
But that kind of leads into the next thing I want to talk about, which is a sticking point for a big reason. What the fuck is going on with gender on Alternia? And we got about 10 minutes to tackle this before we finish up. I think this will be good to end on.
It's not, mostly. Well...
Because it's never addressed.
Yeah.
This is something that we can just inject wholesale because there is nothing about it in the comic. Go right ahead, John.
I've got the kind of speed run version of how I see it. It's like, okay, so if you want it to be organically a part of a character's narrative, you can just make it organically a part of a character's narrative. If it doesn't come up, it doesn't come up. You do not need to, like... I know there's a tendency in the Homestuck fandom to be, like, excruciating about what gender means to Alternians and, like, how it relates to their biology or doesn't. Like, you do not need to do that in a story. Like, again, world building is a tool to serve the purposes of telling a story. You do not have to detail every aspect of what gender means. If it never is relevant to the story, it doesn't need to come up. If it's something that's relative to a character, you can make it literally whatever you want. If you want it to be an analog to human gender, you don't need to explain how it's compatible with their biology or whatever bullshit. Like, there's this tendency to get, like, so wrapped up in, like, well, what does it really mean? And it's like, it doesn't matter. It's fictional. It's an analog for humanity. You can just have, like if you want to have a character that's trans, it can just be trans. And, like, I don't know if that would come up in the context of our rewrite. Like, I don't feel like we've got any, like... I mean, we've definitely got characters where the Alternian concept of, like, gender roles is probably a part of their story, but, like, I think that it leans so heavily on, like, either individualistic or class aspects that maybe that isn't something that's necessarily going to come up. But again, like, I don't think it's something that has to be, you know, detailed with such a fine point that, like, everything is addressed that you could literally think of.
Oh, well, about Homestuck or in general? In general. Anyway, so, like with most other things, the problems the characters are really facing are happening at the narrative level. Like, the world-building elements are sort of a farce. Like, Alternia is just being used to talk about Earth anyway. There's not a lot of sincere world-building. You can sort of look at, I think, where I would want to is Kanaya and how, like, maternity is different for Alternians and how that does characterize Kanaya. But then that talks about, like, Kanaya's femininity is done in this very executive way, and then and that makes her, you know, someone that Karkat admires. But for the most part, like, no, the story appears to be, at first glance, to a lot of people, progressive on gender, but it's really not. Like, we have to watch a lot of terrible things happen to women just, you know, because they're women, and the point of the narrative is that they're going to suffer because the narrative is sexist. And I don't agree that that's, like, good feminism. And not only that, it picks really bad scapegoats to talk about that with. So I think most of the baggage with gender, unfortunately, is with the man behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that like that's a really, really good point. And like I think that a lot of the changes that we are making to the individual characters and how they're presented are going to change the way that gender is presented without ever saying anything specific about it, because like Momo said, the way a lot of the women are portrayed in this narrative is really fucked up, and like that is a product of the narrative. It's never used, it's never commentary on Alternia or commentary on society or anything. It's just kind of like a bunch of women that are like treated like shit by the narrative. And I think that like if you're wanting to make commentary about that stuff, to do it more intentionally. I'm thinking specifically of like Doc Scratch and the idea of like institutionalized sexism and misogyny. But like I think we're also going to have a case where like you get a more nuanced portrayal just by virtue of the fact that we're giving more agency to some of the characters, especially characters like, you know, characters like Kanaya, characters like Fefri, where like they've got a more sort of nuanced portrayal, which is going to inherently change the way that gender is read through the story.
Also, gender is inherently cisnormative and racialized.
Well,
Always.
I agree, and I think that there's a missed potential here, sort of going back to the Earth Zero thing. If we're using Alternia as a point of contrast, Hussey does this weird fucking thing where he like tries to do prejudice backwards on Alternia, which just kind of fails for me. Daft was talking about how Fefri is, you know, a very harsh black stereotype, even though she's at the top of her society. At the same time, he tries to do this backwards with gender, where, you know, the women are violent and the men are dweebs, basically. And I think this doesn't work, but I think what would work is if on Alternia, gender was kind of arbitrary. I talk about this in the troll biology video, but if gender is just something you can pick on Alternia, that would, I think, underline how absurd it is for humans, especially when June starts to actually talk about how she is trans. She could talk, because she does talk to June later on, and they have a, you know, they have a pretty, what's the word? They have in-depth conversations, and I think that could have them talk about being trans. Where VRISKA could say something like, you know, I picked being a girl. Like, you know, on Alternia you can just do that. Like, I had large breasts, and so I just figured I was a girl. And June is like, well, what if you want to switch? And VRISKA could be very supportive. Or Carcat could be like, you know, you're stressing over something that doesn't matter. Stop whining. Stop being such a baby. Just be a girl already, idiot. And that could be interesting, but that's totally unused in Homestuck, where, you know,
it'd be interesting if they were very like trans supportive, but there was still very strict gender roles. Like Kargat's like, of course you can be trans, but don't do that shit. That's for boys. Like,
right? Yes.
Yeah, and that works.
You can pick which gender roles you want, but you have to fucking adhere to them once you do.
But that works for the, you know, sort of trans thread that we're trying to make. I think
it does. And well, and again, so this is coming back to what I was saying, where like if you wanted to do gender shit like that, you can just do it. Like you can just do it within the like the character speaking, because like there is going to be a certain contingent of like there's going to be a certain contingent of fans, and I say this because I've seen it with my own eyes, where it's like, okay, but you didn't explain why they're trans. And it's like, again, you don't have to. It's like, this is what gender means on Alternia because this is what the characters are telling you it means. And like it has importance to the narrative and it has relevance, but like you don't need to dig into like every single possible reason for that. Like I think that having that be just like a fact that is presented is something that could be used very effectively, because you're going to be dealing with again, looping it back to what we've talked about in previous episodes, you're going to be talking about June transitioning as an actual plot thread that kind of keeps coming back, and that's a cool opportunity to do some of that stuff, and also to maybe like back away from some of the weird gender shit that is present in the original comic. So
yeah, I don't know. I agree. Fuck it. Gender anarchy. Forever.
Gender, yeah.
I guess
Gender
the only
anarchy.
thing I'd have to say is, like, there's a distinct part of me that, like, wants to point a transgenderification beam at, like, several of the characters. But, like, that's only because it's a reaction to the way I saw them initially. So, if it... I got... to clarify on the...
Shoot the beam. I'll shoot Karkat with the beam. He can be trans mask. I think that, like, that connects.
Sorry, I meant to clarify that I meant characters, like, trans in characters' genders in the way that June was, and not in the way that, like, they would be trans and pre-established.
I
Like,
see.
there are a couple I would.
I would hit some
But I
people
think,
with that beam.
oh
yeah.
no, I think the point of the ensemble cast works the way it does. I think you could, like, the best way it would work in a cast like this would be, like, you can occasionally sprinkle in some details that, like, sort of confirm it in the way that, like, a writer who knows who is queer maybe would talk about it, but you don't have to, like, you can't make every single character story about being trans. You can just make a bunch of them about being trans. But June's there being the main character, so that does go a long way towards transgenderification beam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meow.
I feel like having a character that would kind of, like, bounce off of June's experience is a potential thing, and I, like, I hate myself for saying this because, like, it's become almost a fucking meme at this point, but, like, I do actually kind of like the idea of that being VRISKA, maybe, but I don't know. It's not.
Yeah, well,
having a character that
if people could still read Hammer as a Hammer, that would be, like, a really cool thing to touch on.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the difference between, like, when you're trans in a system where it doesn't matter versus, you know, where it does for reasons that are more specific to June.
Yeah, and I like that a lot. I think that I don't know. I think that VRISKA kind of works for that and, like, interacts a lot with June too. So that's kind of a neat thing to play off.
Yeah, and make no illusion, like, the reading of trans VRISKA, it does matter for VRISKA. Like, it has repercussions on her.
Oh, yeah.
It explains
Absolutely.
like a lot of the friction she experiences with narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I agree because, like, it plays into, like, what you know, what she is experiencing as far as, like, her relationship to the narrative, and, like, the idea that even with our rewrites, like, the narrative as a force, the negative aspects of it, like Doc Scratch and Lord English, all of that sort of, like, whatever we're calling it, anti-narrative, whatever, fuck it, you know what I mean. That is a very sort of, like, it's a very misogynistic force, like, among other bad things. Like, it is representative of a bunch of really bad, negative, real world things. Like, it is the misogynistic, racist, classist, colonialist power, and, like, the point is that's bad and you shouldn't do any of that stuff, but, like, it's a thing you can talk about in a narrative, and I think it can be very powerful.
That is all the time that we have. We've been recording for about 2 hours, which is the hard limit, I think. Yeah, good stuff.
We did
Next
it.
time.
We podcasted this whole mountain.
I know.
Good job, everybody.
We did it. We will continue to have Daft and Momo on in the next couple ones in Act 5, because this will continue the sort of troll stuff.
Yeah.
For as long as you want, unless I get tired of it.
There you go. But next time we will be covering Homestuck Act 5.2. I don't know how many episodes that'll take, frankly. It'll take however long it takes. If you get more, you get more. If you get less, you get less. As I've said before, make sure to cry and moan about it in the comments if you're angry at us. And as a reminder, as always, we are a bunch of SJWs who want to take away Homestuck and make it not fun anymore.
I do. I want to ruin everything. For you specifically. Yes. You. Yeah, you. You know.
Yes, the listener.
You
Yeah, that guy
listener,
pointing
know
right
who
at you. Yeah,
Jeff.
you. Jeff.
We are, at the end of the day, we are all the cats at the plate of spaghetti.
They can't see the spaghetti plate.
I'm
Shoveling
writing
it into
Homestuck is
our
a podcast
mouth.
by
Yeah.
JoJo McLaughlin,
Yeah.
Janiyah Riley, and Bucky Grant. Hosted and produced by me, JoJo. Please follow the links in the
Okay, me
description
too. Bye,
to each
everybody.
collaborator's
Well, not
Twitter
by every
and
listener, but
subscribe.
hello, I'm staying with you,
I'd
jokers.
like to thank my
You
patrons
can't
for
get rid
this
of me that
month:
easy.
Pyrate, Zipperozic, Kaleidoscope Mediator, Luna Skywalker Tucker, and Jojro. My Patreon can be found at patreon.com/funkmclovin. Have a great day.